Michael Yaconelli is a favorite author, and he said this: when it comes to the spiritual life, I am amazed at how many of us don't know how to dance. We stand before God, the music starts, and we are embarrassed by our incompetence. Isn't that an interesting word? I think it's because we teach each other not to dance. We teach each other to do something simpler, to sit down, be quiet, whatever it happens to be. But we often encourage each other not to dance. Favorite singer, James McMurtry, sings this song where he says, "The gates of the schoolyard are padlocked and chained to keep all the children out of the rain. The art teacher's teaching the virtues of pastel shades. You pay no attention. It won't hurt your grade because you're painting by numbers, connecting the dots. They don't have to tell you you don't call the shots because painting by numbers, they know you'll get by. Painting by numbers, you know you'll get by." You see, it's simple sometimes just to paint by the numbers, to live in the system, to do what's easiest and just expect pastel colors to happen. And there's nothing wrong with a pastel color, but there's a vibrancy to life that pastel colors, blandness, simplicity doesn't speak. Some things need to be danced. Some things need to be shouted. And if we don't do that, we easily let that vibrancy slip away, hide within us and around us. And we settle for something that's good enough, but not too challenging. And thus we learn not to dance.
Amen.
I was formed by two different things that talked about happiness. One was a movie that, unless you were Mormon or at the 1964 World's Fair, maybe you didn't see it. There's 50 million people saw it at that World's Fair, and every Mormon kid saw it several times. It's called Man's Search for Happiness. And it talked about some of those eternal questions and how we're supposed to struggle and find them and get past that which confounds us. And then there's a sentence that you've probably heard because someone once called it the most famous sentence in America. It says, talks about unalienable rights given to us, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I've learned that searching or pursuing happiness doesn't really help us to do what God wants us to do in life. Because like our call to awareness said, happiness is easily shattered by, and you saw that Cynthia put in some of the things that shatter her happiness, but they might not speak what shatters your happiness sometimes. What is it that sometimes is a happiness shatterer for you? Could it be fog on mountains that hide the snow? Illness can't it? What else? What shatters happiness?
TV news.
TV news can, absolutely.
The news mix.
Uh-huh.
War.
War does, doesn't it? Uh-huh.
Bills.
Yep, bills can, absolutely. And it can be something as simple as, I fell down and scraped my knee today. I'm not happy. And see, happiness is not wrong. It alerts us to what's going right and wrong in our life. But it's not what we seek. Cynthia went on to say, but joy can bloom in the bleakest of situations. Happiness is a reaction. Joy is a choice. Let me see if I can explain it to you differently. Yesterday I sat with a friend of mine named Rachel that I've known most of her life, since she was in junior high. And Rachel yesterday was celebrating her graduation from Eller School of Business. And she was happy as could be. And it wasn't just that, but Alex, her longtime boyfriend, that evening proposed to her. She was pretty happy. But let me tell you more of the story of Alex and Rachel and tell you why I love this young woman so much. 3 years ago, Alex's father died. And they made the really non-happy choice for him to go back to Yuma to be with Mom. Happiness would have said, let me stay here with the love of my life. Let me stay here in this place where daily we get to be happy together and not have 4 hours of driving between us. But they made the choice of joy, to see a longer future than just that moment of happiness right now. They chose to, for 3 years, live far apart so that he could be there. But you could see the joy coming to fruition in her because she's moving back to Yuma to be with her love, to be engaged and later to be married to that man that she loves so well. You see, happiness is based on right now. Something has happened to me. I react to it. Joy is a choice to hold on to that same type of feeling in spite of whatever is not quite working. It's not a pursuit, it is a holding on. It's a remembering time and time again in the midst of whatever that you can have that same type of feeling. You see, so often we give to each other and to our children that 8-pack of colors with crayons as big as my finger and say, just color with that much. When what we should be doing is giving them the 64-pack and the watercolors, right? And maybe some markers and maybe even clay so that they get nice and messy in the world. And that's why we don't give it to them, isn't it? Because if we limit it a bit, then maybe they won't make as big a mess. And that's the problem. It's that mess that we want to avoid. And so we go to those pastel colors. See, we're often afraid of the mess more than expectant of the possibility. Isn't that what Roy Moore was about in Alabama? Give me the simple, the one where I can control it, instead of the mess of stepping away and seeing that something else can happen. But there were a whole lot of people in Alabama that said, give us the mess. Let us move forward into what this future can bring. Give us the possibility of what's there. And isn't that an amazing, courageous choice that happened in that state? That people stood up and voted who had been in the shadows. People took a choice of seeing a future of joy instead of whatever was simplest and easiest. And they stepped beyond something that shouldn't have been there. Happiness, about that, Christianity said this. Christianity Today said this. Our integrity is severely tarnished. After Alabama, no one will believe a word we say as a Christian church. But they stood forward and said, let's try to see a different future. They tried to change that story. They tried to help us see beyond just that moment. Joy is always focused on what might be, not necessarily what is right now. Happiness is based on what has happened. Joy is based on what will happen. It is a forward-looking thing, and it begs the question is, right now, am I reaching for happiness, or am I living in joy? Am I searching for some short-term, right-now thing, or do I see the longer picture? Every single one of us has possibilities that we have not dreamed of, that we can't even see in this moment, and they're not necessarily based on anything that is currently manifesting itself in our world. And it may take a while for us to get to the place where we can see them. And it will be tempting to give up before that time arrives. But we have to believe it's there and keep looking for that. That's what joy is looking beyond this that's right here. Wallace Stevens said this, after the last no comes a yes. And it is on that yes that the world depends. How many have heard at least one no in the last 12 months or so? And heard lots of things that said we don't want to, we can't, we won't. We have to believe in a yes that's coming. We have to believe and keep speaking the reality of that yes to each other, even when we don't quite see it, even when the fog clouds the mountains. We have to believe in that yes being there. And it takes a while to get to the culmination and the fulfillment of that yes, that joy. On my Facebook page, I posted 2 videos about Caleb Electric Brain. Did you see those? If you didn't, you should see them. Go to my Facebook page and look at them. Here's Caleb right here. This is what he said. Help me find the nurse who saved my life. He's a 17-year-old high school senior that wants to find the nurse who, when he was a baby, helped him to be able to live. Here's the story. Here's his family. Nice young family, 5 kids. And when he was 13 months old, just past this, Caleb's the little one in the white outfit there. And when he was just a little older than this happened. Killing his mom and dad. Wounding all 5 children. And this happened in McKinney, Texas. And one of the attendants in McKinney said this. This is speaking a dark day for his family. But one of the people who was there as a nurse, her name was Michelle Hook, said, I was a nurse for 2 years at the time, and you were the first patient who ever made me cry. But you might realize that she's talking in the first person. You see, because he wanted to discover his nurse, and 37 million views later, they found each other. And the second video is the video of them speaking with these people who brought blessings into their life. And so here's what his family looks like now. That's Caleb right in the center, surrounded by the other 4 that were killed, that were hurt in the accident, and their new family, their larger family. They're a family of 11 kids now that is doing marvelous. And they have discovered, Caleb has discovered something beyond just that moment. Here's the people they were talking to. That lady right in the middle, she was the one who took emergency calls and began to get people. And when she saw this video posted, she said, as soon as I saw that it was a car accident in McKinney, I knew who it was talking about. And in the same way that 17 years ago, I began making calls, I began calling all my friends and you've got to see this video. Because 17 years before, she said, I began calling every doctor I could find and asked them to come and help you guys. The teamwork that went on that morning was incredible. And there's not a Thanksgiving that goes by that I don't think of you. Because this happened on Thanksgiving Day. When you came in, you were cold and clamped down, making it hard for us to put an IV into you in order to save your life. You needed medication just so we could intubate you so you could breathe. And one doctor suggested that we do an IO. I didn't know what that was. I know what an IV is, going into the vein. An IO is going into your bone. This little 13-month-old. There was one nurse who had done it, and maybe it's more common today, but back then it wasn't very common. And this one lady, her name was Denny. Here's a picture of her. Denny, surrounded by those other attendants, who said a little prayer for her, quickly took this and did the work that was needed to save his life. You see, they looked at him when he first came in and said, there's no hope here. There's no joy here. There's no possibility here. But they didn't act as if that was true. They acted as if the other was true. They looked at this child and they said, I'm going to do everything I can to make his future come true. 17 years later, Caleb is alive, about to emerge with this joy into a new world, that post-high school world. They brought joy, and they just barely now got to see it, because for 17 years he's been somewhere else. They didn't get to know, but suddenly 17 years later they got to reconnect and bring good news into each other's life. Joy is a choice in every moment. It's a choice to believe in something that's victorious and wondrous and exciting that we don't quite see yet. It's that choice to be able to announce that to each other and bring it on a regular basis to each other. That song that we started with and that we're going to end with, that song that you know really well called Joy to the World. Does everyone know that's not a Christmas song? It wasn't written for this season. Isaac Watts, the author, wrote it for that ultimately someday God's going to bring joy to the world no matter what's happening. It's a saying, look towards what will be. Because in the midst of dark times, you don't always feel that joy, do you? But you have to announce it. You have to believe it. You have to sing that song as if right now that joy is going to happen, even though it may not be until 17 years later. Maybe you don't know, but you have to act as if it's going to happen. So I want you to see how that pink joy kind of shines out on this tree. See that? It's kind of neat, isn't it? And not that the other words are unimportant, but this joy is supposed to help us to lift our hearts up. So I need you to help me with that. Don't bring in another joy word. We got several of those to put up. But I want you to find some ornament that speaks joy for you. Because you might have noticed there's still some bare spots on the tree. But if everyone in here brings one ornament, and if you want us to return it to you, you can put your name on it and we'll return it to you. But if you want us to add to the collection of how we decorate this tree year in and year out, bring us an ornament next week in the morning, and we'll decorate the whole tree. It may take us all day long, so bring it in the morning. And we'll decorate that tree with all these ways that somehow we've discovered joy because of this season. And this season is about speaking in the midst of what isn't easy. Speaking in the midst of where it is that joy is hidden behind whatever is here. And speaking that good news that allows us to see something more. Kind of like Ted, who brought joy into his wife's life, right? That's what I heard. There was Sue needing joy, and Ted did it for her. And that's what we have to keep doing, is keep speaking joy to each other. Especially to those who in this moment are having the hardest time finding joy. That's why we do so much work with those folks that are hungry, that are hurting, that are struggling. That's why we speak this message that Jesus spoke. He quoted Isaiah to be able to say, this is what life is about. It's about looking to the person who's brokenhearted and bind that person up. Look at the person who is captive and helping to take off those chains. Looking at the person who is struggling in whatever way and speaking some word of joy, some word of possibility, some word of future to that moment. And you might have noticed there's a lot of people that still need to hear that, don't they? Maybe you're one of them. Listen to the people around you. Hear the way they're speaking joy. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand this week spoke a word to me that told me that she hadn't forgotten joy. You might have heard of her. She was tweeted to this week. Not in a very favorable way. She responded in the best way possible. She said, "You cannot silence me, or the millions of women who have gotten off the sidelines to speak."
Amen.
Is that amazing? She chose to believe in joy and possibility in the future more than that moment. And we have to do the same thing. Don't you love that the person of the year this year is the Me Too movement? Where people have stood up and said, I found a voice, I found a possibility, and I'm stepping forward into it. And they are speaking words of joy into all of us, of possibility to all of us in the midst of whatever else comes. Good news is something we have to bring to each other on a regular basis. It's not necessarily just inherent within our life. There's lots of stuff which hide the mountains from us. There's lots of stuff which are obstacles and divert us to look another way. And we have to keep encouraging each other to look towards that truth that is beyond the moment. 6 months ago, my niece, Hannah, was going to adopt a baby, and she couldn't. The adoption fell through. And she was in a space where she was mourning that. But when I went up to Corey's funeral last week, the most amazing thing that happened, we had a new baby, as we often do. And this new baby, whose name is Ciara, Ciara was born to my oldest sister's daughter's daughter. All right? Now I say it that way so that you understand that Kimmy, the mother, is way too young to have a baby. And she did the remarkable gift of forward thinking to choose to give this baby to Hannah so that she could see a future for that child that she couldn't quite give. And so that Hannah could receive a gift of future. And both lives were blessed because both lives announced good news into the other life. Not always easy to receive news, not always simple to live news, as every child is not necessarily simple to live. But they announced good news, and that's what we have to do. Is however we can speak into the life of each other so that all of us hear that joy is still possible. Our contemporary reading says this: there is nothing I can give you which you have not got, but there is much, very much, that while I cannot give it, you can take. No heaven can come to us unless our hearts find rest in today. Take heaven. No peace lies in the future which is not hidden in this present little instant. Take peace. The gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within our reach, is joy. Take joy. I went to the Immigrant Integration Conference Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And the last year has not been necessarily filled with good news for immigration advocates. You might have noticed that. And yet there was a vibrancy at this meeting. There was a vibrancy of possibility because they were seeing beyond what was here. And they were seeing people that were empowered and alive. They were seeing people that were moving in directions that were amazing. And 3 years ago, I sat with a man who spoke at that conference. His name is Luis Gutierrez. He's a representative from the Illinois area. And he spoke joy into my heart because I went there to Washington with Rosa's son, Gerardito. And we were in the midst of having Francisco and Rosa both in sanctuary. We were trying to say, where's joy in all this? How do we emerge from all this? There were a lot of roadblocks in front of us. And he spoke hope and peace and joy into that space. And he told a story on Tuesday about his grandson. A grandson that comes from immigrant grandparents. And it said this. He was talking to that grandson and he said, well, who are you, son? Because my side of the family, we're all Puerto Ricans, and you know, your dad's side of the family, they're all Mexican, so who are you? And he said, Grandpa, with this arm, I'm 100% Puerto Rican. And with with this arm, I'm 100% Mexican. But in between my heart, I'm 100% American. See, he saw possibilities that were hidden from us. He saw possibilities that we have to open up to. He saw something that we all need to see, and that's that more can be true. Speak joy. Live joy. Be joy for those around you. Amen?
Amen.